kang magiliw, pero sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupit, di ka pasisiin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bukaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdiningning, ang bituin at araw na kailan pa may magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng walhating pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang hinigaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Pia Ontiveros, and it is a pleasure to host and moderate the third Jose Totoy Avellana Memorial Lecture. This now annual lecture is mainly for students who are watching, for them to gain a deeper understanding of current media issues and trends. Media professionals, academics, and opinion leaders share their research, knowledge, and expertise to invite reflection on the impact of communication industries on the people who consume its various products. The late Jose Totoy Avellana, for whom this lecture was named, was an ardent advocate of effective and persuasive communication as both an advertiser and an industry voice. He was an ardent nationalist who was passionate about how communication could be harnessed to spur a better Philippines. Through the generous support of his family, a professorial chair in communication arts was established, which continues his advocacy for the responsible use of communication arts to improve Philippine society. The chair supports the scholarly work of researchers and teachers at Mr. Avellana's alma mater, the Ateneo de Manila University. Now, it also supports this annual lecture. For the last 3 years, the Department of Communication has organized and staged the Jose Totoy Avellana Memorial Lecture, which brings us together virtually or else within this studio today. To welcome all of you to this event, please welcome the Dean of the Loyola Schools, School of Social Sciences, Dr. Cherina Saloma Akpedonu.
With the School of Social Sciences of the Loyola Schools of the Ateneo de Manila University, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the third Jose Totoy Avellana Memorial Lecture. A pleasant morning to all. Here at the School of Social Sciences, we are promoting a way of practicing the social sciences that has at least three dimensions. One, fostering a sense of belonging to ensure the successful navigations of university spaces by those who study and work in the university. Two, translocal and transnational engagements as a way for us to understand our country better. And three, the problem-solving mode that highlights the role of social scientists in offering not only analysis or critique, but practical results that help systems and institutions be prepared for the next social problem. I foresee that today's panels will contribute to our understanding of the important role of the social sciences in showing that the point of communicating is to clarify our understanding rather than to win over an argument with whatever means, such as presenting fact as fiction and fiction as fact. Social scientists and its various audiences can change the mores of intellectual discussion so that we all treat our beliefs as propositions to be tested rather than catchphrases or hashtags to be defended. Our special thanks to the Department of Communication and to the experts from the fields of political communication, digital media, and journalism who are joining us today. I hope that the short time we have together will provide an excellent opportunity to learn from one another and enhance the depth and complexity of our engagement with digital media, journalism, and political communication. In other words, to respond to the call of the problem-solving mode. Have a fun and insightful time this morning.
On behalf of the Avellana family, please welcome Mr. Joey Avellana, the son of Mr. Totoy Avellana.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Avellana family, I am pleased to welcome you to the third Jose V. Totoy Avellana Lecture entitled Communication, Technology, and Truth. I take this opportunity to briefly talk about my father as my way of thanking him for his lifelong legacy, which has given his family and friends the inspiration to set up the professorial chair in his name in communication arts at the Ateneo. In high school and college, Totoy wore many hats. He was a thespian, orator, editor, and head cheerleader of the Blue Babble Battalion. In his professional career, he counted among the first generation of Filipino practitioners in what was then the birth of the modern era of communications after the war in the late 50s and early 60s. It was in the communications industry where he honed his craft, excelling in the fields of film production, advertising, public relations, and marketing. Totoy was a firm believer in the power of communication. He was consumed by it. He would speak eloquently about the topic. Let me recount some of those golden nuggets. Here's one. Communications is power. Through it, one has the ability to teach, to mold, to create. And another. As communicators, we have a responsibility to use communications responsibly, to build up, not to tear down, to inspire, not to put down. Today's communications has been transformed by technology that is changing at such a fast clip that we can ever catch up with. Algorithms and performance metrics attest to the increasing influence and impact of social media in our daily lives. Interestingly, the power of communication has taken center stage prominence, in particular as a result of the ongoing political exercise being presently undertaken. Except that, a sinister dark side of the communications process has also been unmasked. It comes by many names: disinformation, alternative truth, fake news, mind conditioning, to name a few. To be sure, we are all actors in this daily drama as senders or receivers of these messages. Beyond these, however, as communicators ourselves, we have a responsibility to ensure the integrity of the word, whether written, spoken, acted, tweeted, or even TikToked. In a recent online study conducted by Boses Pilipinas in late 2021, with over 20,000 Filipino youth, almost half of the respondents couldn't tell fake news from real. Permit me to quote from the observation of the Boses Pilipinas convener, Dr. Imelda Deinla, and I quote, "The Philippine youth are now immersed in a culture of fake news. If we want to create a better future for our youth, one that knows the truth, who can judge between right and wrong, who can trust institutions, then we will need a collective effort to overcome this information pandemic." So now, on top of a global pandemic caused by COVID, we now have to deal with another kind of pandemic involving communications, news as we know it, but can't tell if it's fact or fiction, as today's program brief suggests. At this juncture, let me thank the Department of Communications of the Ateneo for putting this most timely lecture topic together. Likewise, let me acknowledge our distinguished resource speakers and panelists to today's program. We thank them for their generosity in sharing their time and expertise and for gracing today's event. In closing, let me also acknowledge a talented communicator from the Ontiveros Avellana side of the family, our moderator for today, my cousin Pia. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. A pleasant good morning to all. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of...
Thank you. I should say thank you, Manong Joey. Finally, let's hear from Dr. Jozon Lorenzana, the chair of the Department of Communication, who will tell us more about today's lecture. Welcome, Dr. Anjo.
Good morning. Welcome to the third Jose Totoy Avellana Memorial Lecture. Honoring the legacy of Mr. Jose Avellana in communication and the arts, the annual lecture tackles contemporary issues in communication, media, and society. The department is grateful to the Avellana family for their support in this institutional endeavor. Compared to the media landscape 2 decades ago, today's audiences have the capacity for media production. We have a situation in which users of media have become content creators who, alongside conventional media, participate in the flow and production of information. With less gatekeeping processes in place, information and claims, whether truthful or not, proliferate in the current media landscape. Today's lecture examines the phenomenon of disinformation. Departing from a traditional lecture mode, we adopt a conversational format. The first part is a panel discussion where experts define and analyze the phenomenon of disinformation. The second part is a conversation among scholars and journalists on how to respond to the challenges of truth-telling in a digital media landscape. To facilitate today's conversation, we are fortunate to have Ms. Pia Hontiveros, Chief Correspondent of CNN Philippines and an alumna of the Department of Communication. Please feel free to share your thoughts and questions with the panel and moderator. Looking forward to your engagement and have a good day.
Thank you, Dr. Lorenzana. Actually, IS, but I took comm subjects. Anyway, and that's a long time ago. This year, and mainly because schools are still mostly on online teaching platforms, this lecture is being live streamed via Facebook and YouTube from the communication studio of the Ateneo de Manila. Our first discussion focuses on how the truth on key issues affecting the country can be altered and even twisted to suit certain objectives. Unlike traditional media sources that have ethical work practices that guide its news production, this is true, the newsrooms I have worked in and still do today, we have very stringent rules, the way we obtain information, the way we write, the words we choose. Many content creators, in contrast, have a literal free rein on how to create their own versions or interpretations of events or even the truth. For some strange reason, kasi people think that because they're entitled to their opinions, they're also entitled to their own facts. Let's watch this video.
In our present-day world that looks connected, the allegedly true can be twisted to make it appear to be the truth. Gone are the days when only conventional or traditional media, like print and broadcast, were the sources of news, information, and truth. There were built-in policies, procedures, and work processes that attempted to qualify and confirm facts, figures, and stories before they came out. Not anymore. With digital media exploding from all directions, there are more sources and opportunities to transmit unsubstantiated information for a variety of intentions and objectives. With a few clicks and images, anyone can actually create one's own version of the truth. The truth has not entirely set us free, as it has been twisted by the dubious and at times nefarious intentions of trolls and content creators. Instead of creating better understanding because of legitimate varied views, there are sadly alternative, disparaging, if not harmful perspectives that contort and distort the truth. We end up disillusioned, uninformed, and seek agreement and affirmation, usually from those that share our views. Today's world of information is not necessarily the reimagined public sphere. The reliable and meaningful use of interactive communication platforms is seriously threatened by those who find the truth so easy to alter and manipulate.
Our guests for our first panel today are John Neri, a longtime columnist for the Philippine Daily Inquirer and now writing for Rappler. He's also a lecturer here at the Ateneo's Department of Communication and a board member for the Asian Center for Journalism, or ACFJ. Also, 3 batches ahead of me here in Ateneo. 2, 1, 3. 3. Okay. Hi, John. Thank you for being here. Hi. Dr. Cheryl Ruth Soriano, a professor at the Department of Communication of De La Salle University. Aside from having served as chair, right, of that department, she's also been a research fellow in Australia and China. Dr. Soriano's comprehensive research has been published in international journals and publications, and she has authored and co-authored books on digital communication issues and consumption. Hi, should I call you Dr. Cheryl?
Cheryl.
Cheryl. Thank you for being here, Cheryl. And Jose Mari Paul Lanuza, JM.
Yes.
is an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines, Manila. He has been chair of the Department of Political Science there as well. He is a published scholar whose research interests include disinformation and influence operations, political communication, elections, campaigns, and voting. Hi, GM. Thank you very much for being here. Okay. Before we start, I just wanted to, for the students who are listening, a little bit of an advice lang, two things just for you guys, you young people. First, to please listen very well. We have what we call active listening, because the usual listening we do is, I'm talking, for example, or someone's talking, and then we're already forming opinions or thoughts in our own mind, in our head. No? And active listening, suspending your thoughts, your opinions, and bracketing them literally, and then setting them aside. You need that because so that you can hear and understand and comprehend what people are saying. The other thing is for students, again, to please take notes. Not on your gadgets, and you're probably reaching for your phones or your iPads, or your fingers are suspended, hovering over the keyboards. But what I want to encourage you today, and in the coming years, is to instruments of choice natin should be pen and paper, or pen and notebook, pen and paper. Write down your notes, bullet points by hand, because if it hasn't been in the hand, it's not in the heart or in the head. So active listening, and please take notes, a lot of them. The reason why we're doing this and why these are important is because this morning, what you're actually attending, and you're not just listening to a lecture, you're attending a master class. Okay, and this is you're very fortunate to be able to do this, because we have before you three, and then later in the second panel, three more people, professionals, veteran, and respected journalists and academics and opinion leaders. So this is a really great opportunity for everyone listening today. Okay, so let's begin. So our guests, like I was saying and introduced them earlier, John Neri, Cheryl Soriano, and GM Lanusa. Before we go to the more difficult questions, on a scale of, and I'm sure you're thinking, she's going to say 1 to 10. No? On a scale of 10 to 10, how frustrated are you about, distortions of the truth, disinformation, misinformation? Very quickly now, John.
10?
10. Cheryl? 10. 10. So that makes it 30. Okay. So how did we get to this point? And is there no return na ba? Ito na ba talaga? Or is it going to get worse? People say, before it gets better, it gets worse. No? So how did we get to this point? And are trolls, fake news, revisionism, is this going to be a part of our lives already from now on, John?
Well, there's a lot to unpack. I want to start by saying that it is dangerous for us to speak of disinformation in the passive voice. When we say facts were fabricated or the truth was distorted. Sometimes we use the passive voice because we don't want to point an accusing finger at individuals or institutions. But I think that's actually playing into the game of disinformation agents. We should actually speak of disinformation agents or disinformation campaigns or disinformation actors. Because I think the first thing to note is that disinformation is not an accident.
Sadya.
Yeah, nobody just happens to have spliced a video, showing a political rival in the worst possible light, right? So I think that that's something that we need to actively address. There is an act of illegality, even immorality involved in making disinformation content. I think I want to start there. Yeah.
So there is intent, there is motive. No?
Yes, that's right.
Like
yeah.
you said, hindi naman aksidente to. It's not a coincidence.
That's right.
Okay. Dr. Cheryl. Cheryl.
Yeah. I think it's important to think about the idea that you have a social technical environment. You have the rise of social media. And we say that this rise of social media has facilitated a lot of opportunity for participation. And then that has led to a lot of irresponsible opportunities for content creation. But the second and more important question I think that we need to ask is, in the sense of a lot of this content having been created, what is it about this new dynamic social technical environment that's reconfiguring our notions of authority and epistemic authority? Why is it that despite the fact that many are created, why is it that certain people tend to believe certain information out there that's not necessarily vetted? So I think it goes down to a deeper question of how is this entire environment, maybe the blending of the political and the socio-technical conditions, is reconfiguring our notion of trust, epistemic authority, and also, in the end, truth.
Can you, sandali lang define epistemic authority meaning?
When I say epistemic authority, I'm pertaining here to the authorities that we trust to be telling us what's the truth, what's
we
real.
used to trust or still trust?
We trust. So epistemic is about knowledge, diba? So we have our sources of authority when we talk about knowledge. These are people that are eligible to speak, eligible to be heard, but also we trust what they're saying to be the source of authority, to be the source of the real, right? What I'm saying is that it's important to think about how the entire political environment, JM can talk more about that, but also the socio-technical environment, how those dynamics are reconfiguring this notion of epistemic authority, because it's so crucial in the question about disinformation.
Epistemic authority as opposed to the influencers now.
Also, yes.
In a way?
Yes.
Okay, JM.
To add to Dr. Cheryl's insights, on the one hand, you have the platforms, from a systemic point of view, you have the platforms being more horizontal or being less regulated than other platforms or other media outlets. So that's one. It's more horizontal in terms of access. Anyone who has a voice, anyone who has a gadget, and anyone who has internet connection can speak out their mind, even if it's true or not. But on the other hand, there's also the regulatory side. So if you look at the political system, or if we're zoning in on political disinformation specifically, the regulatory frameworks that we have are finding it hard to keep up, or finding it hard to locate where the roots are of these disinformation actors and how we can stop them. If it's for political disinformation in terms of electoral campaigns, our campaign finance regulations are lagging, and we simply cannot keep up with the speed of the innovations that are happening, especially in the Philippines, where it's a free-for-all fiesta for disinformative actors. The 2016 forms are already ancient in terms of innovation. The 2019 innovations were already ahead of its time, and then
Vintage na yan,
and then we're seeing new forms here in 2022. But the regulations are still somewhere between 2016 to 2017. So on the one hand, you also have that. And it's really hard because all of this disinformation insecurities that we have, it's been years in the making. It wasn't just overnight. And we were slow to catch up. We were slow to respond to it. We were content with heckling or insulting disinformative actors in 2016. We were saying that at least we know the truth. They can get fooled, but we know the truth. But the effects of all of those years are happening right now, and it's bigger than ever before. And I don't know whether our regulators and whether the regular people at their homes recognize how big the problem is and how ubiquitous the problem is.
Yeah. This didn't happen overnight. It took a while. Pero we really didn't see this coming. I mean, you know, the first time we all got on the internet, when we first had our first emails, you know, the first time we discovered www. Ganon, hindi natin akalain na ganito ang mangyayari at this point.
I don't think
we didn't think it would be this way. We thought it would be helpful.
I think there's an initial wave of digital optimism.
Yeah, digital optimism.
Like we all thought, okay, so this is going to level the playing field. Everyone now has a chance to be heard, and so on and so forth. Of course, the research has shown that, and in our own experience validates that a lot of the information sources that we have, let's say on the internet, actually part of consolidated media enterprises. So there has been a reconsolidation of power, for instance. But 10, 15 years after we all thought that, hey, this is the great opportunity for us. So there's been a lot of promise that was not fulfilled. Actually, the opposite took place.
You mentioned, you talked about, JM, you talked about regulating. You are suggesting, although of course we will talk about this at greater length in the second panel, no? But I'm sure pahapyaw natin mapag-usapan yan eh. You're suggesting regulation. Is that realistic? I mean, really?
Regulation has to come in at some point, right? Whether it's done by the state alone or by a confluence of different actors. It has to be part of the solution, but it's not the only solution, because that's terrifying. That's a slippery slope to authoritarianism.
Exactly. All right. There's this question here about, and this is something you're always asked about, how can the ordinary social media user, people on the internet, mga netizens, so how can they distinguish between fake news and what's true? Can we, just go over that very quickly? Sure.
I guess that is that's one of the biggest problems. John was talking about the promises of the digital, and that's of course includes expression. And then expression comes in with information. So there's a lot of people expressing themselves, expressing their opinions, but there's also people making claims about knowledge and information. And those two blur. It's very hard to distinguish the two, but they coexist in the same environment. They flow from one into the other. That's what makes it hard to actually catch disinformation in a lot of ways. So you have had your old versions of falsehoods, yung mga fabrication, changing the URL, direct manipulation of content. But you also have, and this is what we saw in our personal research, you also have a lot of people purporting to be sharing ideas, opinion, or natuklasan ko, I found something. But it's hard to distinguish this as propaganda, as a falsehood, because sometimes they might insert certain falsehoods within a 30-minute video of opinion expression. So that's the part where it starts to become, I feel, blurry.
Yeah. Are you saying that people are entitled, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but we are not entitled to our facts?
Yes, so I think the dangerous part is when you are insinuating that you are making claims about knowledge, about information, no? Versus admittedly saying that this is my opinion, this is my expression. The other difficult thing we see in the context of leading to disinformation are seeding doubt. No, a lot of gossip seeding, a lot of doubt seeding. And doubt seeding, I feel, is playing an important role. It's not blatantly articulating a falsehood, but it's nudging someone to doubt. And then you have other actors that are penetrating the sphere with blatant disinformation. So it's like a one entity seeding doubt, and then when you start doubting, you have other sources that you could pull out to feed that doubt. So that's what we're kind of seeing in our research.
I think what we're seeing is that there's an evolution in the types and the forms of disinformation that we're seeing. Let me take maybe 2 steps back. I think it's important to note that disinformation has been around even before digital media emerged, right? I mean, lying is as old as human nature. I mean, the United States rationalized its conquest of the Philippines as an attempt to Christianize an already Christian country. I mean, that was, that kind of disinformation was already out there, and it happens all the time, right? And even today, for instance, in India, there are many forms of disinformation that are non-digital but also equally damaging, the so-called love jihad, for instance. Now, well, in 2016, I think we realized too late that we were under attack. All these forms of disinformation, and then immediately after that, so you would have some outright, outrageous forms of disinformation, like the best president in the entire solar system, right? I mean, no, I don't think anyone does that now. Now, I think this is where we are now, what Dr. Soriano was talking about. It's more of like gray content. People, as Dr. Cheryl said, seed doubts. There's a kernel of truth, maybe, or a factual basis, but then an entire myth is built around it. And I think that's part of the problem. I mean, this is all in answer to your question: what can ordinary citizens do? And I think the first thing we can do is we need to understand that the problem is changing. Dr. J.M. said earlier, maybe. The regulatory framework is 2016 to 2017, but it's not only the regulatory framework, it's also our own ways of understanding. We're still hooked on, oh wow, so that's what Duterte did in 2016. But it's already 6 years. So, and it turns out that the real masters in disinformation are the Marcos channels. And they've been seeding this, they've been developing, they've been evolving their disinformation over so many years. They're actually they're very good. I mean, have you spent time on TikTok? Now, this will surprise you probably, unless you've also seen this. The most non-political person, non-political member of the Marcos family, Irene, is a totem, is an icon on TikTok. I mean, there are so many TikTok videos about her being a simple person, a person with refined taste, mabuting tao, and so on. And it's like,
Parang she's presented as the face of the family.
It's part of this attempt to humanize this brutal, cruel family. And when I first realized it, I was like, wow. I mean, it is in fact true. She's a nice person. She just happens to be the daughter of a dictator.
But like you said, this has been going on for a long time, long before the advent of social media. Because nung pag-unang balik nila, hindi ba? I mean, we could see it, right? The way they were able to get back into society, di ba?
For me, a touchstone really is 1995. Bongbong Marcos ran for the Senate and lost. He waited 15 years until 2010, and then he ran for the Senate and won comfortably. And I think it's important for us to understand exactly what happened. And I think in 2009, 2008, 2009, we can already see that they were going into social media, especially YouTube, in a big way.
2018, 2019.
Yeah, and then after they have just been continuing to add to the. So there's an entire Marcos propaganda ecosystem on YouTube. And as Dr. Cheryl Soriano was saying, you see the doubt, and then the answer to resolve the doubt is actually another part of that entire ecosystem. It's
okay. So this entire ecosystem, this entire what you call the entire Marcos propaganda machine, if you will, that is in answer already to how large this industry is. Ganun ba yun? That next question kasi is about how large an industry are we talking about in terms of fake news creators, trolls, or people who say a kernel of truth and then it's mixed with so many other things. Who wants to take that?
Do you want?
Okay. It's in connection with the second question. If we look at the specific details of how this information is being put out right now, it's so advanced that the regular person cannot actually differentiate it between what's true and what's false. If you face
what do you mean by regular person?
A normal citizen, it can be an educated citizen, but if you give them deep fakes or heavily edited videos of a person talking about something when that really didn't happen, that's really hard to discern. So if you have these kinds of sophisticated disinformation, then it partly speaks to the size or the magnitude of the industry that's alive right now. But the thing is, at least for our research particularly, it's very hard to establish how big the operations are or how many the operators are, because they're all operating under very discrete terms. So it's really hard to trace. The meme or the post becomes authorless, so you don't know where it started. You don't see how big the reach is, but it's definitely alive. You can see it growing, you can see it spreading. So maybe the authorless aspect is what gives us an idea of how big this is. You cannot hide that big of an operation without being too influential.
And then ang dali ngayon mag-share, di ba? It's just a click of a button. You don't catch something and you think, hey, this is a nice video, I'll share it na. Share ka, retweet ka, no?
I think as an intentionally orchestrated network, it's hard to discern because there's a lot of grayness. People don't make claims that they're being paid. So in our research on YouTube, it's hard because some people are saying that I am just an ordinary person who did my own research. But then the impact, it's what I'm saying, the impact of that entire ecosystem or network is huge. They're being shared not just within the platform, across the platforms. They're most likely being shared outside of the public spaces, meaning in small groups, and then probably extending also in dinner conversation. So what I'm saying is that it may not be that easy to pinpoint it as a paid industry. But the impact of the entire ecosystem on this information is huge, in the sense that as a narrative network, they're able to compose narratives that kind of really can construct myths, distort facts, realities, histories even.
You talked about paid, no? Whether we can't distinguish if they're paid or not, and this leads us to our next question. Because people can always say, I mean, those because we do know of some people like that, no? They're paid to do this, no? Ito trabaho nila. Then they'll say, hanap buhay ko ito, trabaho lang ito, walang personalan. You know, if I don't do this, then I can't feed my family, I can't provide for them. So, how do you respond to something like that?
I guess on top of my head that's where it's hard to put the blame on the lower level people involved in digital labor, because even them, we need to situate this within an entire condition of economic precarity, because I guess these people will not want to be involved in that if they are voting for or supporting that candidate, then well and good. But if not, they're just forced to be doing this dirty work, troll work for money. I don't think they would want to do that. So I guess the blame is hard to put on them. But then, as other scholars have pointed out, it's important to point out the real operators of this information. And I guess since 2016 that this has been pointed out, until now, there has been Senate hearings even on this. I don't think any major political operator has been pinned down, particularly.
Parang sa drug war lang eh. Ang nahuhuli yung small time, no? Yung drug pusher on the street, pero hindi yung big time, di ba?
The only big one actually that was named by a private sector organization, Facebook. Which is now Meta, when it identified Nick Gabonada. Yeah, also the company Twinmark. Of course, Nick Gabonada says, you know, he didn't get the chance to defend himself and so on. But it's very interesting that in that last purge of Facebook, he was identified as connected to this hub of sites that engage in what Facebook calls coordinated inauthentic behavior. So it wasn't actually a judgment on the content. It was in the action. So that's how a company like Facebook would know if you are a disinformation agent.
Inauthentic, meaning para bang hindi ordinary netizen.
Yeah,
like this, I'll share.
That's right.
It's parang coordinated attack.
So, or like they're all created, all the accounts are created at the same time, or all of a sudden you bought new accounts and so on. And then you all updated the same content across the board at 2:42 a.m. It's like, who is awake at that? You know, that sort of thing. So,
pare-pareho sinashare, pare-pareho sinasabi.
Yeah, I think that's one. Lorraine Badoy Partosa said she couldn't understand. I mean, how can you cut down on these accounts when you didn't even pass judgment on the content? And I think she missed the point entirely. It wasn't the content; it was the behavior. These are people who. These are superhuman people. I mean, if they do all of these at the same time, act the same way.
Yeah. Well, if there was Nick Gabonada before, then that must be just the tip of the iceberg. Then there must be so many more, because 2016 yun 2022 na ngayon. And like you were saying, no, there's like a systematic, there's machinery. We can all see it, but parang we can't really touch it. We can't, no, GM? Is that? So, and there are so many channels now. There's I mean, apart from YouTube, there's TikTok, WeChat, etc. No, and then of course all those Viber groups.
So outside of Nick Gabonada and Twinmark, the other big name that has been put out there is Cambridge Analytica and Duterte's campaign in 2016. But outside of those two, we don't have any knowledge on who are running these operations, but they're definitely there. So we have scholarship, we have literature on it, but it's anonymous. So this is what we need to understand. The mainstream sentiment is people are punching down on citizens that are sharing this information or that are believing in this information. But the thing is, you need to punch up. I want to echo Dr. Cheryl's sentiment. You need to punch up, because what you need to ask is, why is there a demand for these types of precarious labor and disinformative labor? So who are employing them?
Who are employing them, yeah.
Which industries are hiring? Which companies are hiring? Which politicians are hiring? Those are what we need to look at. And how we can do that is, one, by establishing maybe interagency councils between civil society organizations, the academe, these platforms, and the government. But that will include regulation. But the regulation cannot be monolithic, or cannot be on the state alone, because that can be a one-way ticket to propaganda, to state propaganda, and that's more difficult.
So again, parang kung drug war pag-uusapan, parang hanapin natin yung big-time drug lord, di ba? Okay. But, you know, I was thinking, di ba, okay, so you said, Kabunado, Twin Mark, Cambridge Analytica, but then, kasi wala naman talagang, meron bang kumpanya na, ano mo, may headquarters, tas may pangalan silang gano'n. Do people actually people don't hand out business cards, hey, you know, I have a troll farm, you wanna hire me? Gano'n. Walang gano'n, di ba? Right?
So,
Baka meron, hindi lang natin alam.
posible pong meron. You have this
Meron, di ba?
You have this
Meron.
information architects
For
from
all campaigns, by the way, right?
Yes.
All campaigns kaya?
Yes. Hindi lang yan one party or one group. So you have this information architects from advertising and PR firms. They're the ones who are running the consultancy business with the politician, and then they're the ones who are serving as a middleman for community level fake account operators, or in some cases, it's the in-house staff of the politicians. So you have interns, you have the employees, the actual chief of staff running the operations, running 10 to 12 fake accounts at a time per person.
10 to 12 lang, liit naman nun.
Pero yun po yung
Hindi troll
challenge.
farm yan.
Pero yun po yung challenge for establishing the size, because you have one person running how many accounts? 10, 50. So you don't know how many are actually involved.
Or 1,000.
Or 1,000.
Teka muna, sabi mo advertising and PR firms. Like?
It's part of our research in 2019. It was a follow-up to the 2018 study on the 2016 elections, but we really can't name these firms.
But we are aware of all these advertising and PR firms that did work for all candidates. Di ba?
I'm not sure about a lot of them. I don't have data on a lot of them personally, but I know of some.
Oo. But you know, like for example, you talk to some of them and some of them would say that they would refuse to work with certain candidates, or meron talagang would work with them, hindi ba? Is that's part of the network ba? I mean, is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I was going to say that sooner or later, the advertising and PR industries have to have a moment of reckoning. We know that this is happening. Some of them have been courageous enough to share their work, although on conditions of anonymity and so on, with researchers. But there has to come a time when they need to crack down on essentially unethical behavior. These are, you know, disinformation architects using principles, techniques of advertising and PR in order to create disinformation campaigns. And I think that, well, they'll have to have a moment of reckoning.
But they do have their own rules. I mean, like, kunyari, journalists, we have guidelines, diba? They do, right? I mean, there's like truth in advertising, etc.
Kind of protocol, or even perhaps the hashtag of the day, etc. I guess, Pia, what I also wanted to raise is that it's important to look at the chief architects, but the blurry part here are the people with faces. We can see them online, on YouTube, our research on YouTube. You have people that amass over 500,000 subscribers. That means that they're also sufficiently earning as individuals. They might not be your chief architects. As I mentioned, it's very hard to know whether they're operating under the umbrella of a larger disinformation infrastructure, but they have faces. They insert falsehoods within opinion articulations, and then they are able to monetize this. Who's making them accountable? So just last night, I checked one of those influencers that we have included in our study. That influencer from 400,000 has boomed into 800,000 subscribers. That all, and then that particular video,
period?
I guess within a year of our research. And then that video of that influencer asking the question, may naabuso ba talaga nung martial law? And then within the video of about 7 minutes, making articulations that wala naman talagang naabuso, kalokohan yan. Ang naabuso lang ay ang mga tao na gustong ibagsak ang napakagandang gobyerno. So that blatant denial of torture is included in that video, and that video exists. And then you have that person with a face. I guess my question here is that, do we need to make this person accountable for making claims when it can also double as, it's my opinion?
Yeah. Or I was asking a question.
I was asking the question.
But the result is planting a seed of doubt.
Precisely.
But if, you know, kunyari, you watch it, may naabuso na nga ba noong martial law? And then a netizen, anybody, educated or not, smart or not, oo nga pala, no? Ganon.
Tapos
Diba?
nag-interview
Mag-iisip
siya
ka,
ng matanda
mag-iisip
sa
ka.
backyard
Oo.
niya. Sabi ng
Backyard
matanda,
niya,
some elderly person, ano po ba talagang experience niyo ng martial law? Napakaganda ng martial law. Walang na-torture noon. Ang mga lumalaban lang yung NPA. And then, there was even an articulation within that video clip where a particular person was interviewed that was casting doubts on the specificities of the torture that were experienced by the survivors that have shared them. So, is it really true that you were electrocuted? Which hospital were you sent to? Oh, you don't have proof of that. It must be false. So, it's something like that. And that's what I'm talking about. Who's gonna make these people accountable?
But these questions, in a way, sound legit, di ba? Kasi, di ba, you know, in our world today, it's like you make a claim, can you prove it? The problem is, how can you prove that you were tortured? I mean, it's not like somebody gave you a medical certificate that you were tortured, right? Diba?
Exactly. Of course, there's proof. You have
Or you can't,
have a
Your
PD.
torturer cannot be your witness. Okay.
Well, that's true. But again, in true, what kind of knowledge do you trust? This person has evidence. I interviewed an elderly person having experienced this and having talked to another person claiming to have been tortured but could not produce evidence. So for this circle of people, this is sufficient evidence to falsify that belief that there's been torture. But then you have another slew of evidence, very important. You have a PD, no? Providing funding for the victims of martial law. You have that entire evidence of people who have been tortured and victimized, and the state providing for funding to be able to support them. So what I'm saying is that it's hammering on one particular evidence, but quote unquote evidence versus.
Yeah, you have the government, in this case the Duterte administration, handing out reparations or financial support for these martial law victims. Yeah, John.
So I guess it's important for us to realize that there are different forms of intervention that are called for. When it comes to advertising and PR agencies, for instance, we can hold them to their own conduct according to their own codes of ethics, for instance. Dr. Serrano's question about what you do with these influencers who engage in public discourse but deny the facts of history. I think another form of intervention will be called for. I'm not suggesting that we should cut down, ask them to stop. I mean, they're well within their rights to do that. So maybe the intervention there would be like a counter narrative, right? It's precisely pointing to the Human Rights Victims Reparations Act, for instance. So there will be many ways of intervening. It's not just the advertising and PR agencies that need a moment of reckoning. I think it's the Philippine society as a whole.
The entire country.
Down the road, I think we need to come to terms. What really strikes me is that in 2015. We started the year in a very different way, and then we ended it in a completely different way. In January 2015, we had the largest audience assembled ever for a papal visit, right? And he was the most popular person ever polled in the Philippines. That was in January 2015. And in November 2015, you had a popular candidate for president curse that same pope. There was an immediate backlash against him, but it was also temporary, and then by January his ratings were again on the ascendant. And I look at that year 2015 and I wonder what happened in that year.
Plot twist.
Plot twist. Yes, I mean it's just amazing.
Okay, we have like about 5 minutes to go, but I wanted to just ask. You talk about intervention, counter narrative, but do you feel like para bang how do you describe? It's like you're drowning in all these. Ang dami, di ba? It can get very overwhelming. Who's going to what? We're going to monitor everybody, and then how are you going to monitor reaction, those shares, those retweets, those,
I'll start so that the academics can have the last word.
Yeah.
I see what you mean, and I think we need to push back against that. Of course, it is overwhelming. There's a term for this, the fire hose of falsehood, right? So we're drowning under that. So what can we do? I mean, we can't all reach for the switch and turn off the fire hose. We can do little things. I just want to focus on one thing. I'm really struck by the research conducted by Dr. Soriano on YouTube, for instance, where she discovers, for instance, what she calls aspirational tropes. Of the
aspirational
tropes, yeah,
TROPES.
yeah. So these are the narratives that are being circulated in the pro-Marcos ecosystem. Why is that important? Because while it's important to fact check, I think it's important to let's say message check. What I mean to say is that, in fact, disinformation campaigns, I think, boil down to just a handful of main messages. In the case of Duterte, one of the main messages was the media is biased. Another of the main messages in Duterte's campaign was that it's time for it's our turn now, no? Not Imperial Manila's. Imperial Manila has been there for such a long time. For the Marcos tropes, my understanding of her research tells us that people look at the Marcos years as a golden age. They actually believe that we were an economic superpower, that our democracy, that our political system then was a genuine democracy, and so on and so forth. So when you come across, my point is that when we come across this information, I think we can message check it and compare it to the aspirational tropes that Dr. Soriano has discovered, for instance, and say, okay, so this is about that. And if we do that, I think we have a better way of understanding. We don't sort of drown under so much disinformation. Let me just end by saying there was an attempt to change the name of the airport back from Ninoy Aquino International Airport to Manila International Airport. And I think we need to understand that attempt was because of that narrative that EDSA was a failure. So that's one of the main messages of that particular Duterte
but there was pushback
ecosystem.
To that,
There was pushback. There was pushback to that, and I think that's how pushback in fact can be generated when we understand these discrete bits of disinformation content as really part of bigger narratives, deeper stories, or overarching themes that we can use to understand.
Dr. Cheryl.
Well, John has summarized it so much better than I could do it. I guess just 2 points for me. I feel like disinformation networks work by building 2 things. Latching on aspiration, as mentioned, because again, I go back to the first question that I posed in the beginning. There's so much information out there, some blatant falsehoods, but why do people believe in them? Right? And I think people believe in them primarily because of 2 things. Number one is that they're able to latch onto deeper Filipino aspirations. Aspirations that, oh, in the past it has been beautiful. Oh, this leader is good. So there's a lot of that packaging or reconfiguration of that image, that the Marcos image is a good image, for example. So any leader needs to be able to create or make their campaign, make their messaging palatable and reach deep Filipino aspirations.
Or make a narrative or change the narrative.
Or change the narrative that connects to deep Filipino aspirations. And I guess the second part here is the question of authority. And I asked the question, why were these influencers, doubt seeders, believable? Why do people believe them? Because they have managed to ground authority over the years, as JM and John have been saying. They have been doing it, creating an ecosystem that corroborates and legitimizes what they're saying, and therefore they have started to continue the engagement and create a sense of authority around them. Those 2 things, building an authority and then being able to latch onto important aspirational narratives, have worked for them to see this information. So therefore, applying the same logics. How do you rebuild authority? The media is very much attacked. Academics are also attacked, which were your traditional sources of epistemic authority. How do we rebuild that authority? How does any other campaign, rebuild the authority to be believed by people na, oo nga, totoo yung sinasabi niya. naniniwala ako dito. And I have emotional and also cognitive resonance over what is being said here. Paano mo gagawin yun? I think it's so crucial in the battle for disinformation.
JM. And then after JM, I think we're going to take questions now from the audience. JM, go ahead.
It's very frustrating to realize that this overwhelming problem of disinformation can actually be prevented or can be taken down a notch. For example, Cheryl's videos on YouTube. We know that YouTube can take down videos whenever they want to. We saw it when they took down Russian propaganda videos when they attacked Ukraine. So why are these videos being maintained online? So knowing that is very frustrating, but at the same time, we cannot rely or cannot wait on these saviors to take down all the disinformative posts because it can just sprout up back again. So what we need to realize is that aside from looking at it from a systems perspective, we need to understand what drives people to crave or to demand disinformative content. And for me, I think a lot of it is democratic deficits. The lost promises of our democratic regimes, the instabilities that our people face, these are at the core of why they believe disinformative content. Why do they trust anti-vaxxers, for example? It's because for the longest time, they have been divorced from scientific campaigns of the Department of Health. It's alien to them. This state, this government agency is so detached from their realities that it's easier to trust people they see on a daily basis or people they see online on a daily basis. So if it's democratic deficits or if it's insecurities or anxieties that drive disinformative demand or drive people to believe in democracies, then we should also look at resolving these democratic deficits because now it becomes a societal level of a problem and a societal level of a solution. You don't confine yourself anymore to an individualist understanding of disinformation where it's just a question of media literacy, it's just a question of echo chambers, or it's just a question of having your own small group penetrated by a bad actor. It's a huge problem, and there's no one sectoral answer for it. But you need to understand that it's democratic deficits as a whole.
Yeah, when you, JM, explain further yung democratic deficits. No? For example, a lot of people say the reason why naglalatch on sila dun sa Marcos, the new Marcos narrative, no, is because there's a lot of disappointment because of after EDSA. And very soon after EDSA, we saw that, diba? So, ang daming nag-question nun na that should have been the country's turning point, and yet, where are we today? Parang ganon. Is that what you mean? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm apart from the anti-vaxxers versus the DOH. Sige.
Partly it's that, but it's also on a broader level, the question of what our democracy has promised versus what it has delivered. You're saying that democracy will give us development, and you're giving GDP rates as an evidence, but at the end of the day, development for whom? The people at the bottom are still there, and they're not seeing any hopes for upward social mobility. Prices are still going up, so all politics is local. The disinformative aspect of politics is still local. So you won't have people having aspirational tropes for the glorious past if they're having a sufficient present, if they're having a good life now.
Yeah, well, because the faces, the names didn't really change, hindi ba? Before, during, after EDSA. We have the same political families, right? Okay. Questions. Yeah, we're going to show the... Okay, ayan. Questions. First, because of the widespread disinformation and its detrimental effects on society, is it due time for the government to pass into law the anti-fake news bill? Who's going to take that? Anti-fake news bill.
I guess the first question is which bill? There have been several measures. The very first was a noble attempt, but it was also, it fell short. It did not even define fake news. So it's very difficult. We want the government involved, but at the same time, we don't want to put more weapons in the hands of the government. Exactly. So it's a tricky thing. I think maybe right now, I think we need to focus on working with the platforms, with YouTube, with Facebook, with TikTok, and so on. Really hold them to account. I think that would be much more effective.
Citizen action instead of government regulation, in a way.
Yes, in a way, but more institutional. I mean, it's not just...
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with John because a lot of the things that we're seeing is also a result of expression, diba? Only abused expression. Pero it's still expression. And so when you have government regulation coming in and a bill or a law such as that, it could give your government unbridled power to curb expression. So
Right.
it better be very clear, no, that it is not, you're not giving government unbridled power to use the law to be able to stifle dissent or criticism against itself too.
Kanina nga sabi ni John, message check, not just fact check. No? Institutional jam.
Yeah, if you have a look at the countries that have this kind of law, you see their experiences. It's a mixed bag, but it's leaning towards mostly anti-democratic uses of this law. So I would really caution against having these proposals or having just one entity monitor all of these activities because, again, it's so easy to weaponize. You don't want this to provide a chilling effect, and particularly for the Philippines, where we have, relative to the region, we have a high level of media freedom, but we're also one of the most attacked in terms of media engagements. You have networks being shut down. You don't want to give the government more weapons, as Sir John said.
And besides, things are evolving so fast, no? Ang bilis magbago na. By the time this law comes into being, wala na, outdated na siya.
Definition
Any other
of terms.
questions? No more na, no? Okay, here, one more. How can web-based companies and social media encourage facts-based discussions and prevent the spread of fake news, cyberbullying, discrimination, anti-intellectualism, scams, and other cybercrimes on their platforms? Who wants to take this? John?
It's very difficult when you realize that many of these social media platforms follow a business model that puts a premium on sensationalism. You know, people click on. That's why it's called clickbait. People click on these things and then they engage, and it doesn't really matter to the social media platforms, to most of them anyway, exactly what kind of content is shared, as long as people are sharing. So I think that it might be difficult. It might be like a moonshot thing, no? Like an Apollo thing. But maybe what civil society needs to do, not just in the Philippines but around the world, is help social media platforms re-envision themselves as businesses. In other words, is there a different kind of business model that might make sense to them? Like I said, it's a moonshot. I mean, it's like wow. Is it even possible to do that? But I think we need to ask those things. I mean, it's not just social media platforms. It's almost any digital media platform. So, for instance, Amazon.com. One of its many controversies include this particular chemical that's being sold, for something else. But teenagers in the U.S. were buying it in order to use it to commit suicide, right? So Amazon was advising people, wrote letters to them and so on. What happened instead was that the Amazon algorithm, when you search for that chemical, suggests other similar chemicals. So it's like does Jeff Bezos really care about quality of life and so on and so forth? I mean, it's one of those things. So it's very difficult to talk about. Can we talk about the things that were mentioned without dealing with the question of the business model?
Sharon?
No, I totally agree. Social media platforms, we see them as technology, like tools where we put content. But that's not really the case. The platform itself reconfigures what we see. What we don't see, it organizes for us a slew of videos or a slew of content that we will interact with and can hide, that can have the capacity of hiding content that we will not be able to see. So it has a certain kind of power over organizing or curating information for us. And in that sense, I think platforms should really be more cognizant about their role in this information and facilitating this information networks and narratives. So what some platforms do is try to put up content, so in relation to education or in relation to COVID-19, no, it tries to elevate to visibility certain content that are vetted by your traditional gatekeepers, doctors, World Health Organization. And in the context of martial law, it's tried to label those content that is from the Britannica or from legitimate sources. But it doesn't stop those content that are about doubt seeding to continually exist on the platform. And it's hard to give the platforms further power to take down content. Because if we start giving them that power as a global platform, it's going to be very hard for them to actually discern later on which I will take down and which I will not take down. It will open to giving them unbridled power like with government. So I think it's fine at this point. What we need to do is to be able to have platforms continually think as also the disinformation operations become more complex and dynamic. Kailangan conscious sila na wala, platform lang kami. We're not responsible about that content. Well, you are responsible because you're curating the content for people. What's your role in organizing this content for everyone and reconfiguring people's notion of trust?
The dominant thinking right now is we want platforms to regulate communication by regulating the algorithms and the content. So if a flag yung ganitong term, ganitong hashtag, then automatic takedown. But that's not really a good thing because it's not transparent. So yeah, it's giving unlimited power to private companies, to these firms. But we don't want that because it can simply be used as a tool against us again. So we want to enhance transparency and accountability from these platforms. We want to demand that either from the civil society perspective or from the government perspective, we want them to be more cooperative in creating a more public interest internet. And we want to allow them or to urge them to have the space for more counter speech. So for example, TikTok, for all of the flack it's getting as a disinformation hub, has its own attempts at creating more valid information by partnering with the Philippine government, with DOH, with DOST, to promote actual content made by actual scientists, made by actual experts, and making it more popular and boosting it in everyone's feeds so that it becomes more seen or more visible, even if you don't subscribe to these accounts. So having those measures will actually help because it's injecting a good amount of good quality information in that muddled public sphere.
All right, I think we've gotten to the point. What, one more question? There's one more question. Should the government and its relevant agencies, DICT, NHCP, DepEd, CHR, SUCs, LGUs, local governments, et al., actively fact-check internet content and coordinate with media organizations to promote safe cyberspace experiences? Well, you'd have to hire so many people.
Well, those are actually two things, right? And I think we should say no to the first one. We don't want them to fact-check the internet content. The government does not have the kind of resources, or the expertise. But as for the second question, yes, I think certainly it is part of their responsibility to help create a safe experience. I think they should continue to engage with the social media platforms. And I think the government has been doing that. But it's not just our government. I think in other countries also, it's really important. It's like, I don't know, Facebook and other social media platforms, they're like the fifth branch of government. It's like, we need to...
So yung fourth, ano yung fourth? Media pa.
The fourth estate.
Media pa rin, ha? Akala ko na-dislodge na eh. Okay. Cheryl?
Well, I'm going to shift to the question. I think, realistically speaking, it's going to be very hard for your government agencies to be fact-checking the information in this sphere. What I think is important, even for DepEd, for our concerned departments, is to really think about how that aspect of asking questions and asking students, people, what should be the basis for you to be able to believe something to be true? It is something that we're taught in college, in research. Pero I feel like this is something that needs to be ingrained at the very core or basic education. When you are told something, why do you believe that? Under what basis do you believe that? So this kind of a practice is going to be crucial so that we will build an epistemic culture that is resilient to disinformation. Kasi I feel at this point, no amount of fact-checking all this content can really be done by government. But if you build strong epistemic cultures that are able to make discernments, no, between many different knowledge claims. So baka mas equipped yung population mo to handle its complexities.
And JM?
In addition to those points, more practical solutions that are short-term, we need to make clear that it's short-term. Other scholars are saying that middleware initiatives should be entertained, like platforms or governments hiring third-party library information scientists to help them regulate content.
Library information scientists.
To help them regulate content or to help them decide what content gets to be kept, what content can be thrown out. But that's really short term. That's really not the final answer in the long run. In the long run, I still think that it needs to go down to the people. What do we need to say for them to believe or for them to make their own decisions and not just rely on anonymous accounts online? What do we need to impart them with? What knowledge, what tools, what set of skills can we give them, or what can we give them that they can be more enabled to not rely on alternative sources of information?
All right, we need to wrap things up, so let's do final words. Then we'll start with the academics muna so we can end with you, John, this time around. So JM, ikaw muna, final words.
Yeah, I understand if people get tired or get hopeless when they look at this information. It's really a heavy problem, but the thing is, it's man-made, and anything that's man-made can be changed. So. Is there hope for this information? Yes. Do we know exactly how to get there? Not really, not yet. But can it be done? Yes. But it's going to be hard. So we need to look into ourselves also and see how determined we are to get out of this mess, because that's the only way we can get out. There is hope, but it's going to be hard. So to the young people watching, don't feel hopeless. Don't be worn down. It's going to take a long time, but it's going to be fixed.
Thank you, Cheryl.
So the political environment, but also the platform environment, and also us, how we function in this social, political, digital environment, all of us have a role in how this confusion about truth, trust is playing out in this environment. So I think it's important for us to continually interrogate the question of why, ang dami-daming information, why do we choose to believe certain information versus other information? Kasi they could all continually be out there. The question is, how do you make choices on which pockets of information to believe versus other kinds of information? I think it's so crucial for us to continually talk about it in our daily conversations. When someone shares to us a video from TikTok, oy, tignan mo to, ang galing nito. Do you ask, why do I believe that? Why do I have to believe that? So that constant interrogation, I think, is going to be crucial for all of us.
Have you found the answer to that question? Not yet.
I'm raising it again.
There's hope. Sabi ni JM.
there's hope.
John.
As a journalist, let me end with a few words on the term fake news. Not all the journalists that I know and that I respect agree that the term is useful. Many of us say that fake news is useless because it's being used really as an act of dismissal. When Donald Trump says, I don't, that's fake news, that what that really means is I don't believe it. That's not something I want to hear. So it's an act, it's a gesture of dismissal. But I think there's a real usefulness to the term fake news. Fake news is a form of disinformation that comes disguised as the news. So disinformation we understand as an act of deliberation, also that involves deception. There's an intent to cause harm, either to individuals or to institutions or to entire societies. Fake news is a form of disinformation that is deliberate, deceptive, and comes disguised as the news. So it can look like the news story, or the URL can look like GMA News or CNN Philippines and so on. Why is, and I think the reason, I think we need to ask ourselves, Why is that still a resonant term even now? And I think it's because, in fact, it's a backhanded compliment to the media. In many jurisdictions,
Thank
even
goodness.
even in the Philippines, even though there is this discourse about the media is biased and so on, journalists and certain media institutions still enjoy a level of credibility, especially in the Philippines, where the largest charities are actually run by TV networks. There is some sort of residual goodwill. Of course, there is also a lot of anecdotal evidence here, no, about journalists going to a particular area and being warmly greeted and so on and so forth, or journalists being asked, is this true, and so on. My point is that media has not exactly been
Dislodged.
no, I mean has not
From discourse.
exactly responded in the best possible way to the disinformation phenomenon. It's taken its time, but I think that media needs to realize that it needs to work on that, precisely because its own reputation is at stake, and whether we realize it or not, it remains a benchmark for how do we know things to be true. If there's a storm coming, I don't think you're gonna look up an influencer, right? You're gonna look up CNN Philippines or ABS or GMA and say, oh, where is that storm, and so on. So when our own lives are at stake, I think at that level, I think we realize that we want to go to the media. So I wanted to end on that point.
Okay. Well, at this point, what I need to do now is do a little wrap, what we call a recap whenever we have, for example, breaking news coverage or live coverage. And I'm going to attempt to do this after this very long and very, very interesting, very insightful discussion with John, Cheryl, and GM. And I'm going to do it by just reading out bullet points that I was doing a lot of note taking, which I always do anyway as a journalist. So I'll start with bullet points that John, Cheryl, and JM shared with us. So first, number one, John is saying, don't speak in the passive voice. Cheryl is talking about epistemic authority, building and rebuilding that authority. John talking about digital optimism. JM saying, don't punch down, punch up. And John talking about this institutional effort to not just fact check but message check. JM saying let's resolve democratic deficits. John talking about how civil society can help social media and digital media platforms re-envision themselves. JM, I like what you said a while ago, this is man-made, so there is hope we can do something about it. And Cheryl, that question, we should ask ourselves, why do we choose to believe certain kinds of information? I hope we get that answer very soon. And John talking about there's usefulness of the term fake news. This is a backhanded compliment to the media. And yes, definitely, media needs and does a lot behind the scenes to try and really step up to the plate. So I'm going to say thank you now to our guests in this first panel, John Neri, Dr. Cheryl Soriano, and J.M. Lanuza. Maraming salamat sa inyo. We really appreciate your time and effort. We hope you stay even for the lunch you like. Salamat. Thank you very much. We're going to take a very hindi pala quick break, 10-minute break, no? 10-minute break. So to the students watching, go and have a little snack and come back to class. We'll see you at 10:40 for the second panel. And we're back. You're watching the third Jose Totoy Avellana Memorial Lecture Series on Communication, Technology, and Truth. We are broadcasting live from the Communication Department of the Ateneo de Manila University. We live in a time where information is readily available on traditional and more so on digital platforms. But with the abundance of media comes varied interpretations of what is believed to be true. There are legitimate sources of news, some aligned with traditional media and others subscribing to accepted norms of ethical practice. But just as productive are content creators who have alternative intentions like revising carefully researched and documented facts or else outright distorting them in devising an alternative version to suit some defined agenda. Here's a primer.
So trolls, fake news, fly-by-night creators, and other unsubstantiated stories are part of our present media landscape. These alleged creators will never admit it, but they are very much around, posting their own versions of the truth and needling those who attempt to spur clearer understanding of important issues. Are we just going to accept them as a natural outcome of digital media? Are we just going to accept that it is difficult to oversee, control, or govern? Do we simply come to terms that these exist side by side with the honest and noble attempts to use social media to encourage genuine discourse, debate, and discussion? What can be done aside from ignoring allegedly fake posts or dubious reactions to legitimate attempts at public discussion? Is it enough to starve the trolls and other truth distorters? How can we save the truth?
That's right. How can we save the truth from people who think that because they are entitled to their own opinions, they are also entitled to their own facts? To help us understand and perhaps find ways to properly deal with unsubstantiated accounts and false claims, we have here in the studio with us our second panel, Attorney Antonio Lavinia, or Dean Tony, currently teaching in a number of law schools while writing for such publications as the Manila Standard and Minda News. He has worked in government as an undersecretary in the Department of Environment and Natural Resources from 1996 to 1998. And was Dean of the Ateneo School of Government, Ateneo de Manila University for 10 years. And that's why I still call him Dean Tony. Everybody does. Hi, Dean Tony.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yvonne Chua is Associate Professor of Journalism at the University of the Philippines, an awarded and long-time journalist. She has been associated with 4 fact-checking initiatives: Verifiles, Check.ph, Fact-Rakers, ganda ng pangalan, Fact-Rakers, and the Philippine Fact Checker Incubator Project. In the world of journalists, dapat ang tawag ko kay Yvonne, idol. Hi, Yvonne. Thank you for being here.
Hi, good morning, Tia. Good to be here.
And Bernice Soriano is a program and project manager and is currently project coordinator for the Foundation for Media Alternatives. She has been a consultant for the World Bank in the Philippines. Her expertise is content creation and training teams in information and digital communication. Hi, Bernice. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Okay, this is our second panel. We had a really interesting first panel discussion, and I'm sure this one will be even more hindi heated, interesting, and that's an understatement. So let's begin with this, no. And this is something we asked them earlier, no. Are trolls here to stay? Is this a fact of life na? Is this parte na ba nito ng buhay natin? Are we going to have to live with them in peaceful or not peaceful coexistence? Dean Tony.
Not peaceful coexistence, because we do have tools to use to fight them, to change behavior, especially of the enablers. I mean, I'm the trolls themselves, you know, that it's difficult. It's human nature. Some people are evil, some people lie, some people do these things for money or for their own interest. That's a given. I'm a philosophy teacher as well, so that I have to live with. We have to live with. But with what we don't have to live with is the way the trolls have been become so powerful, because basically they have been enabled, particularly by social media platforms. So if you find a strategy around dealing with the enablers, who will not necessarily share the malice part of what the trolls do, then we might be able to influence that behavior. To some extent, you already see that the trolls now are more sophisticated, much more sophisticated than, let's say, in 2016 or the first 3 years of the Duterte government. I think that's true, I think, here and abroad. But that means actually they're smarter, and we have to also be smarter in fighting them.
Yeah, sabi nga ng first panel, things have evolved so quickly, no? Yung 2016, Ang dami nang nangyayari ever since then, 6 years down the road. Bernice.
Yes. Well, trolling kasi sa behavior, talagang, I think, nandiyan na yan. It's not something that will go away. And it has been there even before naman social media platforms through other online engagement, through other ways and means than before. And yun coming from yung sa sinabi din ni Dean Tony regarding dun sa for example, kung kaano ka sophisticated or how it has been evolving. Ayun. And same as with the tech. Tech naman kasi din, ang bilis ng pace ng innovations, ang bilis din ng everything. So parang, even when you look at that and how people are also adapting to the tech and how to use it for their own means, so we shouldn't forget the human agency behind it. So tech will evolve, but how do we use it as humans? And there will be the trolls who will use it for this way. There will also be other people who will use it in another way. So yun, so that's how I kind of see it.
Yvonne?
Well, matagal na talaga yung mga trolls. I think the big difference between before and then is in the past we used to have big trolls who are identifiable, who didn't hide behind yung anonymity that technology affords us right now. Now we're dealing with a lot of coordinated anonymous trolls. And these people have, as both Tony and Bernice explained, have been empowered, not just by technology, but by, of course, the creators themselves, those who stand to benefit. So the challenge is, how do we deal with the trolls? We always say starve the trolls, ignore them, and that's true. If for your sanity, for the sake of your mental health, if you can't deal with them, then just ignore them. However, there are also other ways of dealing with the trolls. So one, don't stoop down to their language, but at the same time, if you feel that, you can just call them out and then just exit right away. So leave a message or a fact check or the correct information there, and then exit, and then just prepare yourselves that you would be trolled again, or they'd actually follow you to wherever you are. But these are ways that we can begin. Also, the same way na the platforms have a lot of accountability there, we should also use the platforms to report abusive behavior. I think a lot of Filipinos still just ignore that. They don't...
Parang let it slide lang.
Oo, let it slide, bahala na. And that's not good. Kasi kadalasan yung inaction natin, kakulangan ng action, is what allows these things to, perpetuate itself. Diba?
Okay. Earlier in the first panel, John Neri was talking about how we should not just fact check, but message check in an institutional way, and then he talks about how civil society, parang coordinated effort. Is that something that can be done in this country? Are we ready for this? How can we do it, Yvonne?
Let me take on the that question first, because I'm a fact checker. Totoo, napakalaga ng fact checking na function, because every time there's a wrong information, you have to put out the correct information as a form of counter speech, and you don't want that to continue. Especially if there are what we call data voids, data deficit, kakulangan ng information, you have to plug that in. But
when there's a vacuum kasi.
Yeah, it's a vacuum. Diba yun yung nakakatakot? Hinahanap mo, wala namang alternative. So yun yung paniniwalaan mo. Tapos paulit-ulit, it becomes believable. It becomes like the truth for people. But it's very important for people to also exercise other means. And that's like, simple lang message check diba? Sa umpisa pa lang, you already begin to question the message that you get every day. Kanino galing? Diba? Kanino galing yung message? Galing kay Beshi, galing kay Momshi, ganon. But, saan nila nakuha? Credible ba yung source na yon? So these are things that beyond fact-checking, sa umpisa pa lang, doon pa lang, tapos sabihin natin nakuha nila sa medyo hindi ka nais-nais sa source. Hindi nila alam, diba? Kasi napunta lang yan sa Viber or sa Messenger. Then it's very important, Texas, to look at the message itself, to look for evidence. There's a statement. Sometimes you don't even have to fact check. Is that statement substantiated?
Yeah.
Right? So those are very simple things na beyond fact checking, what people can also do at their own level.
So what can we do? This second panel, that's what we're supposed to discuss. What can we do? To deal with this massive machinery.
Let me share our own experience. I'm also convening a group called the Movement Against Disinformation, which actually also is also part to your question, which is that we also do both fact check. We have lots of we don't do fact check because we have a lot of members who are fact checkers, but we also do message checking to make sure that we are able to disclose and expose to the public the messages that this information is spreading. But our group is broad, so that's the answer to the question. Yes, we can do it in the Philippines. It's quite broad. It's non-partisan, but it's also quite honestly heavily legal. We have many law deans that are part of the group, and we have top corporate litigators that are part of the group, and lots of young lawyers that are not the usual suspects in these things. Like the usual suspects that have been fighting this for years, of course, human rights lawyers. We've done this for, it's part of what we've had to deal with over the past 5 years. But here we're working with a lot of young lawyers who just want to be, to change the situation. So we've actually couple of months in the making, but we're now rolling it out. We have several lines of actions, of legal actions. This week was in the news, focused on Undersecretary Badoy because of her statements, which are not new, but had a twist, an electoral twist, right? So that's very important to deal with it right now. She's always been all of this red tagging and that type of thing, but this time she brought it to the center of the election, which is an electioneering offense, aside from ombudsman offenses. But we're not stopping there, because that's just, first of all, you have to hold accountable. It's the easiest to hold government people accountable for misinformation, because they have accountabilities under our law to tell the truth, not to harm anyone, right? I mean, red tagging, as we always say, moves quickly from online to real physical violence, to actual deaths. My client, Chad Book, is an example of that. I mean, but we're not stopping there. I can't go to details of what will come up, but there'll be cyber libel complaints against not just Undersecretary Badoy, but specific individuals that are kind of notorious.
Other government officials or non-government?
I can't say right now, but some non-government.
How many?
Government and non-government. A few.
What's a few?
4, 5, 7. We're trying to be institutional because we don't want to be personal. So but in our system, you have to file against persons. But we want it to change the institutional response. I mean, to these things. I mean, so. For example, on NTFL-CAC, right, we see that General Parlado, retired general, has been basically disowned by his top superiors already because of the kind of statements he has been making.
You filed something against Parlado?
We'll see. We'll see if I can't until they're actually filed, because the reason is until they're actually signed by the complainant and filed, we really shouldn't talk, because always at the last minute some might change their minds because of the risk involved in all of this. We're planning Supreme Court actions also. You would have we'd have local government people there, you can guess, that might be willing to file certain things, and it will not just be on red tagging. That's the most obvious because of the harm it causes, but other fake news that harm. Importante kasi na kailangan may harm, di ba? Kasi, the one thing here, I think all of us are all freedom of speech advocates and freedom of press advocates. So for me, very important yung harm that the trolling causes, di ba? Parang, if it's asar-asar lang, parang ganyan naman ang buhay.
You can let it slide.
You can let those things slide, di ba? Yung mga paano-ano, pero but the one that causes harm to reputation, to lives, to property, I think it's very important. So we're doing that whole range in the next three weeks. I mean, but months in the making. We're figuring out how also best, and I said it already, how to bring in social media platforms into these cases so that they can accelerate the way they implement their policies. We've engaged with social media. Their policies are generally okay. Their community policies are okay. You can't complain, right? I mean, in fact, you can even, from a free speech point of view, you can actually complain that's a bit, you know, I once wore a shirt, yung All Men Must Die, which is from Game of Thrones. Like, if you watch Game of Thrones, you know that I was like suspended because I was wearing a shirt of Game of Thrones, right? I said, but why can't your AI find this Chad Book is a terrorist? I mean, and this, they just went on and on for years, actually. But a single T-shirt that All Men Must Die, which is from Game of Thrones, and a Game of Thrones T-shirt is noticed by its monitors. So we want to engage with social media. Ideally, it should be through negotiation, right? It should be, okay, these are the things that you should do. We've done that. We've also written, and we've given a list of sites of both sites, pages, even individuals, where you can actually see what they call inauthentic behavior or coordinated inauthentic behavior. But they're very slow. It's just amazing to me how slow they are. And they actually say the policy is 24 hours, 48 hours. I mean, you know, but they're really very slow. So we think that maybe if we can find some kind of legal action that can include them. YouTube acted very fast in the case of Senator Pangilinan, but Senator Pangilinan had to file the cases first, right? And then YouTube pulled down everything after that. So we do need to do that. We certainly don't want to close down social media because from a free speech point and from the point of view that there's a lot of good can do it. So that's not about it. It's about changing their own behavior so that those that are using them will change their behavior. There's some progress, like I like the new brigading policy. The brigading policy of Meta is, even, my understanding is, even if the accounts are authentic, that's one of the sophisticated things. Ako personally, when I'm trolled in the hundreds, me and my group of interns or group of lawyers that work with me, we go through every one to see if we can do something, right? And in the past, it were really inauthentic. They're like flowers and trees and that. But now they really are real people. They're real communities. I mean, they're not as it used to be. But you know that there's a hand behind them. There's coordination. It's like there's a command and everyone posts the same thing, right? It's better English now than it used to be, quite honestly. So
nag-level up na.
you have to watch out for that. But again, my problem there is that even when you complain about that, it's gonna take a while, and the harm is done. What we want is that the immediate thing is done. Like when I was suspended, 24 hours lang naman for my T-shirt, di ba? Hindi na ako nag-complain kasi parang okay na lang yun, parang 24 hours lang naman na ano. So I can live with that, di ba? Because if a policy and then your AI, your artificial intelligence is able to catch, but it doesn't. I know that it doesn't. I know so many people in my work as a human rights lawyer. I just so many people that talagang atrocious, di ba? Na alam mo walang ka-basis, pero talagang nandun pa rin at matagal pa rin nandun doon. Months after, nandun pa kahit kinumplain mo na. So yun, I think that's what we have to also...
Yung 24-hour suspension, ano yun? Badge of honor? Bernice, what can we do?
Hindi ko na ginagamit ang t-shirt na yun pa. Hindi na ako nagpo-post. Ginagamit ko pa, hindi na ako nagpo-post with that.
Actually, nag-worry ako kasi hindi ako nanood ng Game of Thrones. Hindi ako maka-identify.
Well, I guess yung monitor o AI, hindi man yung Game of Thrones, ha? Di ba?
Bernice,
Yes.
what can be done?
Okay. Sa amin naman in FMA, what we do, kasi part of yung project din, the Initiative for Media Freedom, yung goal namin is to educate and to promote critical thinking sa youth, ganyan. So, we wanted to explore other formats. So, instead of the, let's say, webinars, we do have that, yung mga webinars, activities, etc. But we also went with formats like comics. So, we engaged with comic artists who wanted to also learn more about, let's say, information disorder. And also at the same time, they're already, kumbaga parang they're also aligned in terms of they're they're freedom of expression advocates, or they're also, let's say, gender and ICT advocates, ganon.
Comics where we can read this? We can,
Yes,
where?
it's in our website.
Oh, where? On website.
And also
Anong
on our
title?
social media.
Sige nga, let's see how catchy your title is ng comics.
Actually, what
Anong
we did
pangalan?
was we collaborated with comic artists. Like, for example, si Tarantadong Kalbo. We created parang the Inuman Sessions na series.
Okay.
So, the first one was really about what's fake news, ganyan. Tapos parang told in the perspective ng nagiinuman. So, parang magkakabarkada, nagiinuman sila.
Bakit
Isa,
ganon? Pag
ganon.
iniisip mo, Pinoy, inuman ka agad. Talaga.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
that's one of them.
Barkada.
Yeah.
Pero we
Wait,
also
anong
have
pangalan ng
others.
comics? Anong title ng
Well,
comics?
we just
wala
call it
siyang-
lang Comics on Disinformation. Pero
Dapat may
we-
title kayo.
well, hindi pa ganun ka-catchy. Kasi we were
Okay,
trying
okay.
it out first to see
okay.
na if people
Sige.
would take. So, plus we also had yung sa historical distortion. Kasi that was also leading to yung nangyayari with yung, for example, martial law anniversary. Tapos yung mga Wikipedia warriors din natin. Yun, so medyo feature doon. Tapos gender disinformation through kay Marian Hukom naman. So, ayun din, yung din naman sa mga kababaihan. Kasi most of the times, gender disinformation, it's a form of an online gender-based violence na attack, especially in women. I think, like sila Senator Laila De Lima yan. Ito yung mga, for example, kung ang sad to say, pero yung mga case studies on gender disinformation. So we have yung comics na to. We also have from Kiko Machine, from Overheard Comics, tapos si Kapitan Tambay. We also created on privacy and data protection kasi these are also connected, parang they're connected, yung parang themes na to or yung topics na to on how information disorder can also proliferate. So, yun. Tapos we wanted to make it in a humor, parang kumbaga nakakatawang way.
Yeah.
Kasi it's more, parang may emotional take yung audience or at least meron
Yeah.
silang, it's funny.
Ganyan ang Pinoy, di ba? You have to lighten things up a bit.
Yes,
Oo.
ganun, to make it relatable
Right,
din.
right.
Kasi it's hard na straight up na, hindi, ito lang yun.
Oo. Pag
Parang-
masyado kang seryoso, you don't teach
Yeah.
people.
Oo.
Yeah.
So that
Okay.
was one of the things. So we also created songs.
maganda
naman to
yan,
the
songs.
Borrachos. So, very...
Grabe yung mga pangalan.
Sorry, the names are really... Pero yun.
Okay.
So we
Songs.
collaborated with them. Yeah, 2 songs. So
Okay.
that's,
Anong title ng songs?
Kamalayan.
Okay.
That's also the name of yung album nila actually.
Okay.
Tapos the other one is Saysay ng Salita. So, yun.
Okay.
So we intentionally wanted it in Filipino so that, mas catchy, mas madaling kantahin. It's
Pakanta nyo sa Ben and
Sample.
Ben para maras
Ben and
marami rin.
We wish yun.
Pwede,
I know.
non-partisan
Pero,
tayo eh.
pero
di
bago
ba?
kantahin ni Ben and
Basta
Ben,
bagay pa-
sample muna.
Alin?
Ikaw kumanta ka.
Naku, baka ma-murder ko yung song nila. Never mind.
Di ba, may abogado naman dito who can take care of your humor. Yvonne.
Magdadagdag
Yeah.
ako dun sa, kasi Bernie's talking about formats. As you know, ang kasama ako dun sa isang fact-checking collaboration na tinatawag na check.ph.
Right.
And this was launched during the 2019 midterm election. It's really an ad hoc collaboration to fact-check election-related misinformation. So we relaunched for it on May 2022 with more partners. We had 14 before, now we have 34. And that includes civil society. At kagandahan niyan ay dahil sa maraming partners, ang daming ideas lumalabas. So we have one partner, ang Akademiya at Bayan kontra sa Disinformation, na naglalabas din aside from the fact checks na infographics, comics in color and in black and white. Ang nakakatawa, ang taas ng pass-on rate. I had to prompt one of their coordinators to say, lagyan mo ng label nyo kasi walang copyright, naka-comics lang.
Okay.
Diba? Para alam ng tao, para they can approach you and get for ano.
Teka, anong name ng comics?
Iba-iba. Kasi
okay.
it's mostly on the historical distortions, the Marcus denialism, diba? The Marcus Smith.
Pero yung comics niya parang seryoso pa rin.
Itong sa Abacada to. Hindi,
okay.
ano to?
Ano na siya?
May humor na.
Okay.
May humor na.
Yeah.
Yung iba serious, pero iba may humor. Kasi it's also executed by different artists that Abacada, the civil society group, taps. So maganda. Tapos, they're printing it at pinapamudmud nila sa grassroots. Napakalaga nun. Kasi mahirap na nasa online lang. Right.
Right.
We all know that misinformation also proliferates.
We may be the social media capital, but so many people are not.
are still
Yeah.
offline. Like we know maybe about 25% to a third are
Yeah.
still not online. And then one of the things na napansin namin na effective, talaga yung video fact checks. Kasi previously, hindi tayo nagpa-fact check sa kadalasan ay text lang, texto. At then we move towards yung may infographics, no? May infographics. The infographics are still very powerful as but video, iba talaga ang Pinoy. 'Di ba? Number one talaga tayo all over the world pagdating sa consumption ng video. So, for Check PH itself, the collaboration, what we did is yung mga fact checks nila, we convert it into videos, verticals. Vertical shorts. Di ba kasi yan yung para for mobile friendly. So nakakalog siya ng mga 500,000 views.
Wow.
Not bad.
Yeah.
But we have one partner. So ang Probe, galing ng Probe, ginagawa nila, yung kasi may archival sila, doon nila kinukuha yung mga videos. And then yung nagpo-push ng nila sa video fact checks nila ay social media influencer. Si Aunt Julie, si McCoy Dubs.
McCoy Dubs.
So you can very well imagine how this resonates with with the crowd.
Yes.
So napakalaga. We were talking about this with Bernice a while ago before we came on board, to be innovative and to also fight. I mean, kung anong form na lumalabas yung misinformation, to also be there, not just in that platform, but in the format na hindi bastos o hindi peke.
Yeah, to fill the vacuum in a way.
Yes.
Interesting. So again, comics, video fact check, tapos McCoy Dubs. That's
McCoy Dubs for Probe,
Aunt
yes.
Julie.
Aunt Julie.
At may kapatid pa si Aunt Julie. Alam niyo ba yan? Check nyo. Tap
Pero
her
this
too.
is to ng Probe, which is our partner.
Oo. But it's interesting, di ba? Yung the humor that's needed to lighten things up a bit. To medyo, parang, at the risk of sounding so mali yung sabi mong parang binababa. Hindi binababa.
Hindi ka pwedeng condescending.
Hindi binababa.
Diba?
What I
Hindi
mean
pwede.
is parang, to make it more palatable, to make it,
Yes.
because
Relatable.
Yeah,
That's the right
relatable.
word, yung
Because,
way.
halimbawa,
Kasi-
kaming mga journalists, di ba, nag-newscast kami. Pag seryoso kami masyado, minsan di kami pinapakinggan.
exactly.
Ngumiti lang kami ng konti, magpatawa kami.
Exactly.
Pinapakinggan na kami,
Yeah,
parang
sure.
ganon. Di ba? I guess that's why you're going that way. Maybe because you realized after a while na kapag masyado kayong seryoso, when the output, the product, the material is too serious, you don't, I mean, di ba?
Kailangan pa rin natin yung serious, pero yun
Yeah,
lang,
no.
paano lang natin
Content,
ipaparlay,
yeah, oo.
content, paano
Yung
natin,
content is the
Oo,
same,
diba?
but
Yun
I
yung
think
lagi
yung
natin,
delivery.
Yeah.
From yung anchor mo is
Right,
decision. Because
right.
it has to be really well
Definitely.
researched, di ba?
Yes.
And then how do you now push that in different formats
oo.
on different platforms?
Di ba? Napasubo ako mag-TikTok. Manood. Hindi ko na.
You're on TikTok?
No, manood lang.
Grabe dito,
Kasi
pag ikaw nasa-
well, ayaw ko pa kasi, I still have to figure out na
Oh, wait,
hindi
keyword.
how hindi
Ayaw
siya
ko
pwede
pa.
ayaw ko
So
pa. Eventually, kasi I think
You
we
will.
have no choice if we want to be,
Yes, yes.
but I
You want to
need
be
time to
relevant.
I need time to develop the concept
Din, wala
and
nang
work
time.
with young people.
Wala
to,
nang time.
No, not for
Pagkatapos
elections.
ng
not for
election,
elections.
nasa gitna na
But,
tayo.
And of course YouTube longer na, di ba na ano, but di ba, that really is the one that works in this format, and so kung masyado kang serious talagang hindi ka di ba, hindi ka papakinggan.
Pero alam mo
hindi ka
yung,
panoorin.
kailangan really short. I was in a conversation
talaga.
with
Yes,
some, behavioral, They used to say na ang attention span daw natin for social media, dapat daw 10 seconds. Tapos naging goldfish, 8 ba? 9 seconds yung goldfish. Ngayon daw, 2 seconds.
2 seconds. Oo.
So parang kung di mo mag-catch in 2 seconds,
Well,
sorry ka
yeah.
na.
To add to that, so di ba kanina I was saying na nga 1 hour, dati ang mga shows sa TV 1 hour, ngayon 30 minutes. At hindi full 30 minutes yan kasi may commercial load ka, so minsan 24 minutes. And that is long. A voice report, a package, if it's 2 minutes and 30, ang haba. Gawin mong 1:15, but full pack, okay ka doon. Homilies, di ba? Di ba, Dean? Sa, hindi naman sa pari kayo, pero di ba, 8 minutes daw. Yung tinuturo as dapat 8 minutes ang homily. Ang mga mga ads, 30 seconds before, di ba? Ngayon, the shorter the better, 15 seconds. The soundbite, for TV, 12 seconds, sometimes better kung 8. Di ba? Yeah. So it's really attention span. That's why you're saying the video, yung video shorts na yon, how long
just,
it
kasi it tries to explain pa rin. So it's about normally under 3. I
Yeah,
think that's
okay.
still long. But
Okay.
however, ang napansin natin, it also depends sa audience.
Yes.
There's some
Yes.
audiences na, okay pa rin yung long form,
Yeah, oo.
di ba?
Or as long as it's
Documentary.
well written and well
Yes,
edited, that's okay.
compelling talaga
Yeah, yes.
dapat.
Finish it.
Mahalaga
Yeah.
yun.
Oo.
Oo. But for yung mabilisan, lalo kung sa mobile binabasa, kailangan shorts talaga.
Yeah. Oo. Yeah, given the internet, how spotty sometimes, Okay, so, wow, I got so much from you already, It's so interesting what you guys are doing, but is there more that you can do, or, what kind of help do you need, how can people help you, what else can we look forward to? Dean, without you spilling the beans on who you're going to file cases against.
Actually, so for example, yung mga partners natin sa MAD, dun sa US, kasi mga Filipino groups, nagmamass action actually sila in front of YouTube, in front of Meta, para that is communicated. Kasi I think warm bodies are also very important in terms of social media companies and individuals that are to be one of the things that we were asked earlier was yung do we have enough laws, diba, to deal with this?
Yeah.
We actually have.
Yeah.
I would say 95% complete na tayo doon. So it's
Meron
really
pang
just
5%?
well, ang kasi yung liability. To be honest, yung liability ng social media companies, diba, is not
yeah,
very
platform
clear,
liability,
diba?
yes.
Gusto ko sana civil liability, financial liability. Pero that they're doing this because, in fact, diba, clear naman yung analysis, fake news, controversial things that are posted attract more traffic for social media. Diba, yun ang basic na algorithm nila, diba? So you also want to that behavior can also attract lawsuits, can attract diba, financial penalties. I think importante yan na gawin. Ang struggle natin sa legislation is we do not want to give the government, diba, another tool against free speech, free press, etc. We don't want to
Government
do that.
regulation of social media.
Government regulation.
It's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah. It's a nightmare.
How are they going to do that?
Like even yung recent law passed on SIM registration. That has many problematic aspects. So I mean, may yung basic about registering who you are, okay naman, and no fake accounts, all of those are basic, but ang dami napasok doon na violates right to privacy, diba? And contradicts the Data Privacy Act. So we just passed the Data Privacy Act, which is quite a good law. Ang daming hassle kasi we have to adjust so many things to it. But then suddenly, ito na. So I think yun ang kailangan nating tingnan. But otherwise, we have the right set of laws already. I think it's time to just use them properly. I think the social media companies have good community policies. Pero wala akong masabi sa mga community policies nila. Pero kailangan talaga silang, yun isa din yun pwedeng gawin ng maraming tao. I-engage you pag nag-complain kayo kasi may nakita kayong hindi dapat, di ba, nandun. Ituloy-tuloy nyo yung complaint. Hindi yung parang let it slide kasi nandyan na, di ba?
But that's a Pinoy thing. It's a Filipino culture thing. Na parang, the refusal or yung ayaw mag-complain kasi maaabala ka, or it will take forever, which used to be the case anyway. But now what you're saying is, yes, file a complaint and pursue it. Go after it.
Use the laws that we have. Use the laws that we have, and invoke the community policies of those social media. Just to make the difference, just to show the difference, diba? With usual media, with traditional media, diba, and including new media like Rappler that has, diba, followed journalistic ethics and protocols, editing, the basics of editorial decisions, and right to reply and things like that, diba? Yun ang traditional way of doing things, diba? Na kung I used to be actually chaired in yung Press Council, Philippine Press Council. Interesting kasi I was chair for almost 10 years. 2 or 3 cases lang kami. Kasi wala talagang problema sa right to reply. Yung Philippine Press Council was just founded by the print newspapers. To the PPI, di ba? So that kung may individual na nasaktan na ano or wants to side niya, may right to reply siya, di ba? 2 or 3 cases, in fact the same person, hindi ko na nabanggitin, na ano, and in both cases we acted naman and na-solve naman siya na ano in 10 years na nandoon, di ba? That's why we said dun sa bill noon ni Senator Pimentel, who's a good friend of mine, former the former Senate President, the late Senator Nene Pimentel wanted a right to reply bill. We really told him, kinig naman siya, there's no need for a right to reply bill because at least on newspapers, all of them really,
we
really,
reach out for
really
comment.
do it. And I think the broadcast media
many of
even
them
more,
don't
diba?
want to have the right to reply because they don't want to reply.
Yes.
Okay. Sige, Bernice and Yvonne, what else can you add?
Yung sa batas, alam mo ang problema sa ating kongreso ay kadalasan ang gusto nilang i-regulate yung content and then i-penalize yung author.
Yeah.
But we're fighting a different creature nowadays. The content is not exactly the one who published it. It's not exactly the creator. There's really this unseen hand, the enablers, and that's very difficult to trace even if you do message checking and source checking.
Yes.
And we know that, we have had studies, diba, by sila Jonathan Ong, sila Jason, Cabañas, who have actually identified a whole infrastructure, a whole industry behind the creation, the production of false information and inflammatory pieces na ano. So if we have that kind of legislation, nakakatakot, 'di ba? Kasi you're punishing yung mga visible, yung mga pinakamaliit, yung down the nasa downstream na ba kumbaga. So that's one thing. One thing that every time they have this piece of hearings on another proposed legislation against disinformation and disinformation, naalala ko, di ba, umpisa pa lang, di ba, nag-hearing na yung Senado, di ba, tinawag pa yan, lahat, journalists, sila, kauson, at during then, the Grace Po Committee, the consensus was, we have enough laws, what we lack was yung law to hold public servants or civil servants who purvey false information accountable. Di ba? Ayaw naman yan ng ehekutibo. So, those are things that, like, I believe in what Tony says. What we need to do is put the laws, the existing laws to good use, file cases against those. Some are long in coming. I hope, buti lang, hindi pa prescribed. Pwede pang magsampa laban dun sa mga ano. But as far as platforms are concerned, the community standards are well and good. But there's one thing that always, grates on my nerve is their newsworthiness clause. What does it mean? Di ba, alam natin yan. For Facebook, no? Kapag ka ikaw ay politician, political party, government official, because you are newsworthy, we don't demote your content. We don't demote your content. They will do that kung talagang may actual harm na or potential harm. But do we wait until we have what happened to the US, the Capitol riots, before they acted on Trump? So ayaw nila nun. And that's something I feel na dapat mas nuanced yung approach doon sa newsworthiness na clause ng platform.
Okay. We're going to have to wrap this up in a bit, but I just want, may questions. Sige. Okay, question muna. Before we get your final words and before you wrap this up, so the question is, should individual false posts be countered by specific posts to disprove the false claims? Just ignoring them won't stop them anyway. Yvonne, take this.
Okay.
Ganyan na yung
like I said,
kanina.
naniniwala ako sa counter speech. So kailangan for every false post, dapat may katapat. Kaya lang sa dami ng ang daming beses ulit-ulitin. But that's very important. I think
copy-paste.
I agree.
Yeah, that's what we have to remember. Kasi nga, they, our disinformation experts strive on the illusory truth effect. Paulit-ulit, nagiging totoo. So, kailangan yung ating counter-speech, paulit-ulit din, kahit na nagsasawa na tayo. So that's very important. But at the same time, kailangan ma-complement yan ng bigger picture, ng analysis ng kung ano nangyayari talaga sa disinformation natin, the disinformation landscape, para maunawaan ng tao at for policymakers, alam nila rin at for civil society and the whole society, kung paanong interventions ang gagamitin.
Yeah. Bernice, you want to answer that question also?
Oo, kasi maganda yung point na sinabi niya, yung countering, na for example, for every, let's say, post is may counter post. And dyan din pumapasok yung how we can be involved Kasi it doesn't have to be, nandun naman yung studies, nandun yung fact checks, you can, then on that. But you can create content that can counter. And the same way, kung hindi man to create the content, you can share. The ones that are verified, the ones that counters certain yung disinformation, malinformation, etc. And very important is sinabi ni Dean Tony about yung being aware of what you can do sa platforms, like reporting, ganyan. Kasi napansin ko rin yun even amongst sa friends ko, sa family, parang may nakita na silang post or meron na talagang na goes against community guidelines. But wala. Hinayaan na lang. Parang, and the platforms need this They need this yung na we have to tell them actually through these mechanisms na no, we won't stand for these kinds of content. It's now your parang client base telling you. Parang ganon. So, yun. Those are some of the ways and then na I think with sana makamake ng more dents. Kasi meron naman there's a dent. But it has to be amplified some more.
Any more questions? Okay. How can the youth do their part to fight against misinformation and trolling in everyday interactions on their personal social media spaces? We encounter trolls all the time. It can be scary to stand up to them when you know that, okay, I can't see that portion, that they are part of a bigger network. Sige, yung mga kabataan.
The strength of the trolls are in their numbers, diba? So you actually want to figure out how to attack those numbers. So ano ba yung brigading policy is a good way na parang pag ma-communicate and maano yun, yung brigading stuff. But kailangan ka din actually mag-respond also with the numbers that you have. So that's very important. Sa akin, in my own personal spaces, parang pag may attack, yung team ko deletes everything after we check it. And we also ask other supporters and other to come in, di ba? And then actually, pag makita mo na the mix now is 80-20 positive na okay na lang yung mga pasama mo na yung trolls paminsan-minsan doon kasi hindi na sila nagdo-dominate.
So, meron din kayong sariling trolls?
We call them angels.
Angels!
White angels, di ba?
Guardian angels.
Ako, to be honest, I don't know what Yvonne thinks about this, but I actually feel, kasi I followed this from the very beginning, I actually feel that many of our traditional media organizations are very good. They got so enthralled also with social media at the beginning that they didn't moderate their comments, their etc. Diba? And enabled also the behavior, diba? So sa akin kasi, almost from the beginning I started this kasi I at the beginning actually it was so much fun to have so much discussion, diba? Then when it became nasty, talagang pull them down.
Moderation.
Talagang moderation, active moderation, diba? Lalo na if you're doing a lot of these things, diba? You have to do active moderation. So yun din ang dapat ginagawa ng mga diba, ng active moderation. If you really want to use it as an engagement tool. Otherwise, you just close off the comments, diba? Section if it's just too much.
I was just wondering, with all the time we need to spend online and moderate social media and guard, do we even have a life offline? But let's please not forget our lives offline. Yung totoong buhay, Okay. Yvonne, respond lang. Sige.
Oo. Mahalaga yung content moderation, di ba? So, but ang just taking off from that, mahalaga din para sa mga kabataan is to keep themselves safe, di ba? So, content moderation. Kung di nila carry, mag-deactivate muna, mag-detox, sige, magpaunat, magpa-keratin. Kung kailangan, di ba? Chill muna. That's important.
Ginagawa ko din naman natin.
Yung detox is, kahit sa mga estudyante ko, I keep telling them, because I teach fact-checking for a whole semester. They're immersed in that toxic environment. So I said, sige, chill muna kayo, di ba? Party hard, di ba? Shopping muna. So that's important. But ang gusto ko sanang gawin makitang gawin ng mga youth ay pag nakakita sila ng trolling or maling impormasyon is to also share the correct information. Lalo sa family and friends nila. Yung mga lalo those who aren't digital or hindi savvy sa paggamit ng SOCMED na nakakakita ng information. But at the same time, one thing that they have to keep in mind is they have to be empathetic.
Yes.
Hindi pwede yung talking down to your lolo, lola, or gano'n. Hindi pwedeng confrontational. It's not like journalism where you can name and shame, call out, diba? That's part of our work. But in the real world, that's not going to get you anywhere. It's very important. Talk to your and kung pagalitan ka na, tahimik ka muna and then find another strategy. One of the best ways is, sabi ko nga lagi sa kanila, is what we've already studied, pre-bunking inoculation theory. Unahan mo na, pre-bunking inoculation theory. Makarinig ka ng fake news, alam mo, makakarating sa nanay mo. Unahan mo na. Oy, Ma'am Shi, narinig mo na ba na ito? Diba? So that's very important for families. Kasi tayo, kami, fact checkers tayo, debunking, verification. For the household, pre-bunking, unahan mo na and do it a very nice, gentle way. Huwag makipag World War III sa over dinner.
Do it with a smile.
Yes, dapat yung pabiro, humor pa rin. Tapos, one of the effective
Yung style mo ngayon, the way you're talking, yan.
Carry, kailangan. Kasi thunders na ako, mga estudyante ko, Gen Zs, di ba? So, you really have to make it like, ay, naisa rin ako, tatanga-tanga rin pala ako. Yung parang, it really has to be like empathetic.
Very interesting. There is one more question? Okay. One last question na to. Okay. What about self-regulation among the industry stakeholders, as in the advertising industry, for example? There has to be some rules on accountability, especially since social media has become a key channel of communication. The question is from Manong Joey Avellana. Kailangan sagutin natin yan.
I want to start. Kasi it's really a pet peeve for me. It's one of the, marami ng elephants in the room, but it's one of the big elephants in the room. Because of Jonathan and Jason's studies, di ba? Essentially, ito yung take ko sa kanila, that behind all of this are very good advertising people, PR people, part of that industry, very smart, very experienced, di ba? Kasi all the the best practices from a convincing point of view is there, di ba? Galing talaga kahit paano, lalo ngayon, I mean, unbelievable, one of the campaigns, really, really good, the discipline, di ba? So, I don't know how, di ba, pwede bang mag-self-exposure kayo? Pwede bang mga colleagues, kung alam nyo naman yung mga kasama nyo sa industry is doing this, is there a way you can hold them accountable, di ba? Kasi, no names, parang, alam lang natin na nangyayari, it's like a ghost around, and but parang they have a ghost life, but they also have they're doing this for corporations, for the usual clients, but they're doing this, my understanding is on the side, because these agencies will not accept, these special projects as a contract, di ba? But so these are people that are doing this as individual, parang, sana may ganung regulation. I really don't know how, hindi ko siya makakrack Kasi pwedeng legal action na, pero hindi ko talaga siya makakrack. And so I'm putting it out there, not just to the panel, but are there ways that we can do this, di ba? If, in fact, kasi parang clear naman ang studies na these are not amateurs, no? Yung first part, yung sinabi ko kanina, yung Duterte campaign 2016 and the first couple of years, medyo very crude, di ba? So parang, maybe there's still minds around it, obviously, pero makita mo na
Sophisticated yung playbook ngayon.
Ito ngayon, very sophisticated yung playbook. Hindi siya di ba?
6 years ba naman?
Na-fine-tune, nahandaan. For the elections particularly, hinandaan talaga.
All campaigns naman, I mean, at least the 5-6 major presidential candidates, lahat naman sila may advertising or PR firm that's backing them up.
Kaya naman noon.
Kaya naman noon. It's a given.
But that's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about those who are doing special operations that are in this ecosystem.
Kaya lang kasi walang online. Hindi pa online, mas hindi siya coordinated at
or yun kasi may di ba yun, mga press releases, di ba? Yung ginagawa din yun sa mga press releases, sa mga columns. Pero medyo kita mo naman yun, and then yun nga, sa traditional media, meron ka namang process, the editor looks, so even when the editor favors a candidate or whatever, a publisher, kahit paano, may certain process pa silang fina-follow.
I mentioned in the first panel that we have very stringent rules in the newsroom, the way we obtain information, that even has to be guided by very ethical standards, and then the way we write, the words we choose to use, etc. But and also I just want to mention that John Neri in the first panel had mentioned also na yung mga advertising PR firms, we should hold them to their standards. And parang may day of reckoning din yan. Okay, wala nang tanong, okay, we're gonna wrap up na. So final words first from everyone. So let's start with Yvonne. Idol, Yvonne.
Ikaw naman.
Tita
Lodi,
Yvonne.
Lodi tayo.
Lodi.
Kailangan Lodi.
Hindi alam ng bata yung idol. Lodi.
Oo nga,
sige.
Lodi dapat.
Oh.
Alam natin yung misinformation at trolling ay malaking problema. It is a societal problem. Hindi yan malilik na through fact-checking lang or message-checking or legal action. Kailangan talaga sama-sama tayong lahat. So kung di tayo sama-sama sa laban na to, ay nako, we will be wallowing in misinformation. The vicious misinformation that we're seeing for a long, long time.
Okay, Bernice?
Parang just to add na rin na we shouldn't forget yung agency din natin in using, for example, the platforms, in going online, ganyan na. What you also bring out there, sana yun din yung gusto mong makuha. Parang ganyan, diba? Hindi yung, parang nakakalimutan na, hindi, it's always ganito, or it's ganito, may kasalanan, whatever, ganyan. Lahat tayo, meron tayong, din dyan, may at stake, at meron din tayong responsibility, at dapat din nandun tayo. And, earlier on, nag-uusap kami ni Yvonne about yung kahalagahan ng communications. And maganda yung point na sinabi ni Yvonne earlier, yung sa circles of influence, yung family
Your spheres of
and friends.
influence,
So,
yes.
Oo. Yung communications, yung talagang, yun nga, you don't talk down, you have a conversation. Sometimes mas dun nagko-convert, or sometimes dun pa okay, mali pala yung naintindihan ko una. And that's okay. So, di ba, parang hindi yung parang, kasalanan mo ganyan yung sisihan agad or magagalit kayo sa isa't isa, hindi na kayo mag-uusap. That's already a breakdown and that doesn't solve anything. So parang knowing that and being also aware then of ourselves, how we, kasi sometimes, like ako personally, sometimes I forget na, wait lang, sino ba yung kausap ko? Kailangan, nag-uusap ba talaga kami? Or am I just talking down? Or am I just, lecturing? Ganon. So, yun. So, yung active na communication, that's very important. And I think, yun din. Parang, I hope it's something then that people don't forget na tao din yung may agency in terms of sa platforms.
Well, to add to your point about communication, earlier at the beginning of the first panel, and I addressed this to the students, the Ateneo.com students who were required by their professors to attend this lecture. Thank you so much for being here, as if may choice kayo. At may deliverables daw, sabi ng isang teacher nyo. But anyway, ang sabi ko kanina nga is napaka-importante yung active listening.
Yeah.
Ang active listening is yung iniisip mo, yung opinions mo, lahat ng thoughts mo, lahat ng emotions mo, you get it like this, di ba? And then you bracket it and set it aside literally because that's the only way that you can really listen, di ba? That's active communication. That's what you're talking about. So that we can be empathetic, as Yvonne was saying, so that we can hear what people are saying. Kasi if, kunyari, ngayon, I'm saying something, tapos hindi ka nakikinig sa akin, tapos nag-perform ka na ng own thoughts, opinions, you won't hear, right, what I'm saying. That's so important. So communication, hindi lang one way, two way, dapat yan. Okay, Dean, Tony, kayo naman, final words.
Just two quick final points. The first is, this information is harmful. And it's not really just in politics or in elections. We saw that in the pandemic. We see this in war, Russia, Ukraine, in our dispute with China, so much disinformation. Also, the climate change is my issue very close to me. Grabe, we fought disinformation also for a long time. No, so that's the first point. The second point is I do agree the importance of agency, the importance of really taking this seriously. But I think it's very important to also target the enablers, the biggest enablers, the corporations, the platforms. To some extent kasi pag na-deal with mo yun sila, di ba, things will just follow if you're able to deal with like what we say in climate change, but we only have to deal with 100 corporations to actually change their ways. And so all our behavior is important, our individual behavior in the internet or like in climate change is important, but let's also not lose the sight that there are big players here that are enabling this and that are profiting from this because of their business model, and we need to also address that.
Okay, we're going to say thank you to our guests now, and you know it's so important to say really a big thank you to the three of you, because you brought up so many interesting points, and I wanted to do this very quickly, a very quick recap via bullet points lang. Yvonne was talking about counter speech. Wag magsawa dapat, ano, so don't just let it slide. You do need to fill that vacuum, or else that vacuum will be filled by someone else or something else. And then, of course, the second panel kasi was, you know, we're laser focusing on what can we do. And this was very interesting to listen to everything the three of you said and what you're doing. So Dean Tony's movement against disinformation, you've started with one, but you said there will be more, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think.
Marami pang cases.
Marami pa yan. So the point is legal action.
Marami kaming lawyers and they're all pro bono.
And yung sabi niyong not the usual suspects.
Not the usual suspect of
legal
lawyers,
action to hold officers, officials accountable. You will go up to the Supreme Court. Fake news, after all, what's important is fake news that harms reputation, lives, and property. And you are, like you said, figuring out how to bring in and engage more with the social media platforms, but you are generally happy with the good community policies. Bernice talking about the comics, no, as a very smart, I think it's a very smart, lighter way to deal with this, the Inuman Session series of Tarantadong Kalbo, Kiko Machine, Overheard Comics, Kapitan Tambay, ang dami na. And then the songs, na ayaw mo naman bigyan ng sample. Pero sabi ni Dean Tony, ask Ben and Ben to do it. Yvonne, talking about check.ph, launched in 2019, and from 14 to 34 partners for this 2022 elections. That's very, very interesting. And of course, comics again. And the video fact checks that you do, yung mga shorts. And then we talked about attention span and how we need to stay within that. And then how you use social media influencers also, like McCoy Dubs, Auntie Julie, and right now I can't remember yung kapatid ni Auntie Julie. I'm sure somebody will comment now and say sino ba yun. Nakalimutan ko na yung pangalan, but anyway, okay. And then, interesting, yung sinabi ni Lodi, Idol Yvonne, ni Professor Yvonne, itong pre-banking, inoculation, parang bakuna. Bakuna lang to. Unahan na natin ito. Unahan mo na, but do it nicely. And Dean Tony, kanina, di ba, I said, diba, how you deal with trolls, and then sinasagot nyo rin, diba? And sabi ko, so meron sarili kayong trolls, sabi mo, hindi, angels ang tawag doon. We all have our guardian angel. So anyway, so we needed to say thank you. We need to wrap this up and say thank you to our speakers today in this second panel. So earlier, of course, we had John Neri, Cheryl Soriano, and GM Lanuza. And for this second panel, we want to say thank you so much to Dean Tony Lavinia. Hanggang ngayon, Dean pa rin ang tawag ko sa'yo. Everybody calls you Dean. Bernice Soriano, Foundation for Media Alternatives, and Yvonne Chua, professor, veteran journalist. Saludo na talaga ako sa'yo. And to the students who are watching and well, attending because you were told to by your professors, yeah, and others besides that, we thank you very much for spending your Saturday morning with us. And we hope that you did listen and that you did active listening as we suggested very nicely kanina. And we hope that you did your note-taking also by hand. Sabi ko by hand. And we do hope that your takeaways will empower you to engage in this battle for the truth. And a few more thank yous before we go. So one big thank you. Sorry, I have to say one big thank you. One big fight. Ateneo kasi ako eh. One big thank you to the administration of the Loyola Schools, headed by Vice President Maria Luz Vilches. I pronounced that correctly. The University Committee on Occupational Safety and Health, led by Dr. Norman Dennis Marquez, the Central Facilities Management Office, and the School of Social Sciences Dean, Dr. Charina Saloma Akpedonu, for their support. We'd also like to thank another one big thank you to the Association of Communication Majors, or ACOM. Wala pang ganun when I was in college.
Com ka ba? Or com major?
No, IS eh. Pero I took com electives. The Multimedia Information Resource Laboratory, or how do I pronounce this? MIRLab? MIRLab? Kasi wala pang MIRLab nung nasa college kami. At isa pa itong wala pa nung nandito ako sa Ateneo in the late 80s. The Eugenio Lopez Jr. Center for Multimedia Communication, Dr. Jozon Lorenzana, and the production team and staff of the Department of Communication. And lastly, we are very grateful to the Avellana family represented this morning, and he's still watching, by the way, by Tito Totoy's son, Manong Joey. Para kaming honorary cousins kasi, without whose support this lecture would not have been possible. So Manong Joey, thank you so much. And thank you all once again. We hope you can join us next year for the 4th Jose Totoy Avellana Memorial Lecture. And by then, here on campus, I'm so sure of that. So have a great day, everyone, and may God keep us all in His tender care till He brings us together again. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.